You're now live.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board with the City of Salem. And we have a quorum. Good morning, Samantha.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. And I think, actually, I was just pulling up the agenda. Great. We need to do a quick roll call.
Certainly. Thank you. Ashley Morey.
Here.
Jeremy McKay. He indicated he wouldn't be attending. John Hannum. Also. Jason Stats.
Here.
Samantha Ross.
Here.
Mark Smith.
Here.
And Thomas Crozier, who also indicated he was unavailable to attend today.
Let's see here. Okay, great. Well, we did that. We did the welcome call to order. We need a motion on the floor to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
I'll motion to second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Great. Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Thank you, everybody. Tori, do we have any public? Oh, let's see. And I skipped that. Approval of agenda. Does anybody, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve. Oh, I'll second. Sam.
Great. And any discussion, additions? Great, we'll go ahead and all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Agenda is approved. Corey, do we have any public comment?
I have not received an email or request for comment.
Great. Moving along swimmingly, we have no action items and we will move right on to discussion. So I kind of brought up in the last meeting, just kind of to make some space for opportunity for each of the members to on this advisory board to kind of reintroduce themselves, give a quick little background on the seat that they fill, whether it's a resident seat on the board or a business or an at-large seat, and then what your original interest was in serving on the advisory board, how long you've served, and then yeah, and then we'll go from there. So I guess I'll give everybody. It's a bummer we don't have the full crew here this morning, but does anybody want to volunteer to go first?
I will. I'll
Great,
volunteer.
Sam.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Ross. I represent, I guess, a business, WaFd Bank here in West Salem. I've been on this board. Tori, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say close to 2 years now.
Yeah,
about 2 years. I originally decided to, actually, I filled someone's spot and I had a really great conversation with Tori, and it just sparked my interest having a say and just being in the know as it directly affects West Salem. I think it's very interesting to, know what is going on where we have a say, where we don't have a say. So that was my motivation for getting on the board, was just the West Salem area and being in the know. Did I answer all the questions, Jason?
Yeah, you answered all of those questions just wonderfully. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
Mark or Ashley, would one of you like to go next?
I can go next.
Great.
My name's Ashley Morey, and I started at Salem Electric coming up to 10 years ago. So I have started as a customer service rep up front, and then I've worked my way up to lead. And I actually joined the board to kind of replace another employee that was here that was on the board, so kind of a replacement. But she kind of told me about it, and so I applied. But I, kind of twofold. Obviously, professional development. Wanted to see what this is about and what this group does, and it's really cool to be a part of it and kind of just see that there is a group of people that do discuss what's going on over here. West Salem is kind of its own little niche, so it's kind of nice to be involved and see what's going on and how things take time, but there is people that are working on moving things forward as best they can. So I'm learning a lot. I think for me, the biggest part is the learning. And I remember at one point, our previous members, I can't remember now, Mike and, oh gosh, what's his other name that we lost?
Jeff.
Jeff and yeah, was it Mike and Jeff?
Mark.
One of them talking about how, it almost takes like a year or two to kind of get up to speed on here. So kind of right now, I feel like I'm just getting my legs under me and just learning what all this is about. So it's a lot of education for me. But I know in the questions you wanted to know about things, Jason, like what other things we'd be excited to see about. And I kind of asked the group here too, in our office, just to see what our my coworkers would say. But I do want to say, when Samantha has talked about the signage coming into West Salem, it's something I have never thought about, and it would be really cool because I don't know, that's just something that hasn't ever crossed my mind, not seeing it. If it was there, everybody probably just be like, oh, it's there. So I'm like, that's a good point. Like there's one going into Kaiser, there's one when I go home because I live in state and there's Sublimity. So like there's little things like that everywhere. So that I think that is really cool ever since she's mentioned that. But something else that we've talked about here, because we walk obviously from our office, is the area down Patterson and Second by the school. And that whole the it's industrial down here. And I know the city is working on beautifying and all of that. But it's very interesting ever since I've been here, how almost like it's unfinished down there, it just kind of ends. And there's like the dumpster down by the fields. And there's been many times where there's people sleeping in that little shack that they use for the food, for the football games and stuff like that, under the osprey nest, because we kind of maintain the osprey nest over there, so we also have that kind of access to that. But just that whole area under the hill and stuff, and how it's a little rough, but then that's also right next to where you have the kids or parents coming to pick up and that sort of thing, and it's just really kind of dirty down there. And I guess I don't know, and just the sidewalks kind of just stops and it's unfinished, and it's just kind of a strange corner, but just kind of food for thought. And something that I'd like to see. But yeah.
Great, thanks, Ashley. I was going to loop back around to project ideas and suggestions. So Sam,
yeah.
Okay. We'll definitely come back to you on that. And Ashley, if you have any more, then we'll come back to that as well. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Great. So I'm Mark Smith. I'm product development manager for Baxter's North America. So yeah, my seat is for an industrial business, I guess, in the area. We're located on Merlark. Yeah, I joined the board about a year and a half ago, also kind of as a replacement for a previous employee who was let go from the company, and he was replacing another previous employee when I think he timed out on the board. So it's just, when it was described to me, it was a nice way to, like Samantha said, be in the know of what's going on down here around where I'm working. And I'm also a resident of West Salem, so nice to know what's going on in the area and have a say.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And Tori, go ahead. What's your role here?
Okay. Tori Bamford. I'm an urban renewal and economic development project manager. Been with the city going on 15 years. Manage urban renewal projects really throughout the city. There used to be 8 urban renewal areas. There are now, if you count Jory, we started to do some housing focused urban renewal projects. But I was here when Pringle was one of the urban renewal areas that's closed. Fairview is pretty much closed. We're just finishing out some additional funds, but managed projects really all over the place, getting more involved in downtown, West Salem, Mill Creek Corporate Center, so Southeast, all over Salem, really. Our offices are downtown, and I'm with the city. Happy to, so as far as like support staff to this group as your meeting, I'm just here to help facilitate transition as you get new members and provide information and whatever you guys need to be advisory to city council, to their renewal agency.
Great, thanks, Tori. And my name is Jason Statz, current chair. I think I'm into my 2nd year of a 2-year term. Is that right, Tori?
Yeah, I think you're on the 2nd year. So each is a 3-year term. So you'll add your 2nd year of a 3-year first term. So you get 2 terms. Yep.
Yeah.
If y'all have any questions about your terms, please, I've got it right in front of me here. And Samantha, you've been around for a little bit longer than you think you are. 2019 to be exact.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Linda, where am I at in my term? Have I served 2 years yet? And going and in my
You're,
3rd.
Your appointment was September 13th, 2021. And then so that you're in your term 1, which expires on June 30th of next year.
Great. So I am in my 3rd. I'm in the 3rd year of my term then.
That
right?
makes, yes.
Let's see. Jason Statz originally joined. Well, I own across the street Vintage and Resale in West Salem, and as a business owner, the business has been around for it'll be 5 years this November. You know, I saw some opportunities for improvement in the community, and I wanted to kind of be aware of what had previously been going on and what was currently going on in the Edgewater district. And then of course learned that there was this whole urban renewal area, joined the West Salem Neighborhood Association, the West Salem Business Association, all very important memberships for any business owner, I think, in the area. And you know, I just think that there's a lot of opportunity to really shape West Salem into an extension of downtown, as it does encompass the same urban renewal area, because we do have the water, kind of that waterfront piece too, and that cohesiveness between the Edgewater district and hopefully in the near future Marine Drive, you know, and some good money allocated to that, I think, from the recent bond that passed. You know, would love to kind of continue to see these projects that so many people have worked on for so long prior to myself, that also had a vision of what West Salem would become and is becoming, that we can kind of continue to, you know, that I could kind of advocate for that as, you know, become more educated about what those projects were, how they came to be, and continue to advocate for them, how I see them benefiting the city in the future. So that was kind of my, and also just wanting to learn more about land use, because that's, there's a lot of ins and outs of land use, the process that, you know, developer goes from applying for an initial permit, discovery, all of that, the pushback that they might receive from the community, you know, how all that's handled. Anyhow, that's just a little bit about my interest and why I'm here on this board. Projects. So Ashley, thank you for sharing. To further the discussion, Ashley had some projects, and actually I loved your kind of suggestions. Now, my understanding is that when we discuss project ideas, they have to be new development. Is that right, Tori? They have to meet just a couple basic criteria of new development. They have to be within the urban renewal area. There's money for projects, but there's also money for grant matching as well when developers come in. So if we can entice a developer to come in, there's match money essentially for new development as well within the renewal area, within our boundaries. So those are kind of some just basics, right, Tori?
Yeah, really quickly, I sent this to you guys, but I'll just put this up on so everyone can see it briefly, and then I'll pull it back down. But I have this together as a quick reference for last meeting. We talked about the urban renewal plan. The plan has goals and objectives of projects. So as a quick guide, in the projects in the urban renewal plan, so this group is advisory to the urban renewal agency, and your basically sideboards or guidance is around these projects. So public improvements, so that's why you have Second Street happening. Park improvements, so they're a permanent thing to think about with urban renewal. Is it can't be maintenance, has to be a newly funded, newly constructed project. So the plan references an Edgewater pedestrian plaza. Jason's mentioned digging back to see, probably in an Edgewater study of some kind back in the 90s, there might have been a reference as far as a plaza. It might have even been before the Edgewater Parkway. I'd have to see how far back that goes. It might have been a reference to those type of elements. So I'd have to do a little bit of digging there, but lighting, streets, curbs, sidewalks. So a lot of things Ashley mentioned as far as improvements, streetscape. So enhancing the Edgewater. Everyone loves Edgewater. And so we're doing what we can to have Second Street replicate a lot of the elements you have of that main street feel of Edgewater. Pedestrian, bike, transit, public parking. That's just something to be addressed as demand warrants it. It could be funded, but then it's a matter of how should it be done. We have parking facilities downtown, and it's tricky. But I don't know that we're at that point yet. If it were to get more dense and kind of become the downtown that a lot of people feel it should be, and then you'd have to start to address that. And then, like you mentioned, Jason, preserve, rehab, redevelop. So you're right, we have a matching grant program. It can go on to either an existing building as new building addition. So it's adding square footage. Something to think about too is a lot of these are community benefit, but it's also tied to improving the tax value. So if you're making an investment with urban renewal grants, you want to recuperate that. So best way to do that is like a greenfield site. There's some areas where there's no development. So you have a grant that can help get development to happen sooner, and then you can capture that taxable value. And that's true too when you add new equipment, building square footage. Otherwise, I think it's in the Oregon Constitution that it's limited as far as how much taxable. I think it's limited to 3% per year that the assessor can increase your tax value. The only way around that is new improvement or new development. So it's an incentive to get that to happen. Also, community benefit. We have a lot of old, worn out, blighted properties. So it's all these incentives and projects to help address that. So this is just something to look at. I sent it in an email. I'll pull it down now. The second column to the right just shows current projects referencing how that touches the urban renewal plan projects. But yes, you're right. And it goes further than what was mentioned.
Great. So I guess I'll open it up for anybody who had ideas along these lines of things that they really wanted to see in, they'd like to either see some research or, a list of suggestions for Tori, or that we send off to city council that, you know, we'd like to continue to see these particular ideas that go along what projects are approved in the URA plan.
I'll go. You know, I've spoke to our sign, and I feel like we've floated that for a while. I know that there's a process, but I definitely would think that would be in the realm of improvements. It's just, Tori, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was just a matter of where we could put it per ODOT.
Right. The areas that have been identified are, because when you think the way it's been discussed, and it's even been on a priority of other boards, not just you guys, is having gateway treatment. Well, a lot of the gateways are pretty much along 22. So then it's this balance of city and ODOT. When I interact with ODOT to find out where we could place it, depends on the size. They're all about safety, visual impact, you know, of distraction. So you can't have any of those things. So then it really starts to whittle down where it also gets into, because there's a lot of community involvement. On one hand, you have a city standard sign to the point of, that's a lot of what you see when you travel the city limits, and we do have one in West Salem, but it's not in the district. So to identify West Salem downtown area, like a West Salem district, we have a historic property, but we don't have necessarily like a historic district. So it's hard to say, like, how do you differentiate that area? What does it look like? And so that's where, yes, you could do a gateway treatment, but then you have to consider, you know, the standard city template and methods to get around to do something different. I think there's North Gateway area. It's taken a community group years to try to get a different sign than the standard. So it's just, unfortunately, processes, ODOT processes and city processes to get around, if you will, a proposal of a different look or feel to highlight a district. And I think that's my understanding that this group has had, is to not necessarily say City of Salem. You want to highlight the fact that you're in a, you know, a unique district of Salem. So there are other ways around that too. Like we can do public art, we can do, you know, streetscape elements. So anyway, there's some guidance and some bounds to work in, but there are creative ways to work within those bounds too. You know, if you think of the traditional monument sign, it might be a little more difficult, but there's other things that can be done to, you know, to achieve potentially what you're looking to do. Mm-hmm. Sorry, long answer, but no, it's complicated.
No, appreciate that. I'm just really quite hung up on that one area that they've already said no. So when you're coming off the bridge and it's just an eyesore, I just think of that Kaiser sign and what they've done there and the landscaping, and they raised it up. And I know that a ton of people crash into that.
Yeah, it was just repaired, that whole section.
if that could be like, I'm all about an uphill battle, but I just really feel like deep down inside, like that would just be the most opportune place for something like that. So I'll move on. But another area I would like to see improved is like where, you know, behind the Salem Electric, so that industrial, the Rain Suite building. I know that we're doing some improvements on 2nd Street, and I think that is, and First, and I think that is amazing. But back in that area, as one is maneuvering around to get to Edgewater or Patterson, or there's just some site improvements. And I'm kind of going off here. Jason, can I have a third one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Edgewater. I think there's just so much potential, and there are just some dilapidated buildings that are more like right by the highway. And that would just be a perfect spot for either a parking area or just an opportunity for a business to go in there and make it more than what it is. So I think there's some old investment individuals, gentlemen that own investment property down in that area. So that's kind of what I would like to see moving forward.
I know exactly which building you're talking about, and it would be great if that was just a parking lot for the area, considering it's right next to where the Salem Community Market on Thursday is, and overflow for Northwest Human Services, and then of course the business community right in that area. Mark, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not directly in the purview of this board, but yeah, if anyone, I guess, were interested in applying for grants to do something with the old Rain Suite building, I don't know if there's any interest that you know of, Tori.
I know they're
Really
actively
nice
marketing it.
Yeah.
And that's some of what you guys are trying to push toward too. So we have a 20% matching grant up to 300,000 that we just last year the Urban Renewal Agency approved exception criteria so they could get potentially more than the 300,000. So that was some of, we're doing this public improvement for 2nd Street, and we're starting to see some redevelopment of some of the older Oregon fruit. Now, yeah, it'd be great to see something happen at Rain Suite. So we're trying to target it with financial incentives, and I know that there are brokers actively listing it and trying to get it to move, but I'm not sure what the status is.
Yeah, it works as a convenient storage area for the work on 2nd Street right now, but it'd be really nice to get something redeveloped there. Other than that, I don't have any great ideas for projects that I think that we would have a direct impact on, but like to be part of the process.
What do you think about Murlark, Mark? It seems like with Baxter's, you guys have so many more workers than Truett had. It seems like there's a lot of parking along Murlark, and I'm not sure if there's like business needs or something to address like that area.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about trying to get some of our warehouse space consolidated on the east side of Murlark so that we don't have lift trucks going back and forth across there. We have enough parking on the east side of the building, I would say, but some people like to park on the west side for convenience. I've had my car hit on Murlark before, so I don't park there any longer. But yeah.
Great, thank you, Mark. Some thoughts that I have. I'm interested to, I guess I need to go down and walk that Rain building area because I'm not very familiar with it, and so I think I'll take some time to do that because 2 of you here have mentioned kind of that particular area. My interests are heavily Edgewater focus, retaining sound barrier wall, bathrooms in the park, increased lighting, potential. When we talk about a pedestrian plaza, what is that? Again, what does that look like, right? And potential area for signage, art. These are all things that kind of are on the research list already. But I think it would be, that green space could be heavily used in addition to, because it's well connected with walking path, mostly to Wallace Marine. And as that connection continues to improve, having multi-city events, Sam, we just, who's the gentleman from the soccer fields that came and spoke at the West Salem Business Association?
Yeah, that was Dan Guajardo.
Yeah, and so Dan really talked about as they're continuing to expand or essentially running out of room in their current location, and what does it look like to have an expanded event over in Wallace Marine Park? But then how do we start looking at utilizing all of West Salem's green space, not only Wallace Marine Park, but the Edgewater green space and corridor there, for in conjunction with the riverfront park, because that whole walkway area and biking path becomes really conducive to, larger scale outdoor events, which could be heavily revenue generating, not only for local businesses and the city as far as permits and fees and things of that nature. So, and just tourism as a whole, which directly affects Travel Salem. The more heads and beds we get in those hotels, the more money they make to be able to promote Salem as a destination. So I really see the green spaces being very interconnected with a quality economy, and however we can help develop that here and push recommendations forward to City Council and have Tori assist us with that process and facilitation, I think the better. And because right now I really feel like the green space on Edgewater is underutilized because it doesn't have simple resources like bathrooms, additional signage, a sound barrier wall, because it's very noisy. So if you wanted to have and potentially even safety, because there are areas where you're walking along, and then if somebody veered off the road, they would drive right into that park space. So I consider that to be a potential safety issue. I don't know if that's ever happened, but so certainly a possibility there.
Really quickly too, because I think this group would like to know, tied to Edgewater. So 2nd Street will be going in as a 25-mile-an-hour street, and there was a neighborhood group with a neighborhood association pushing for speed changes to Edgewater. So that'll be reduced to, I think it'll be 20 miles an hour on 2nd, and they've got it from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour on Edgewater. So you'll start to see that change happen. So at least as far as like pedestrian activity and safety, Jason, hopefully to help alleviate that fear. But 22.
Yeah, I've been really vocal about that. Yeah, I was really excited to hear that speed change is coming in along Edgewater for safety, because originally 5 years ago when we opened up across the street Vintage and Resale, I believe the speed limit was 35. We got it lowered to 30 because 35 was unreasonable, and so there's some type of Oregon revised statute that says you can only lower a speed limit by 5 miles an hour at a time or something like that. So we had to go through, there was a process that had to go through to go from 35 to 30 and then 30 to 25. And they had to be separate studies or something of that nature. But yeah, I'm super, super thrilled about that, because I can't tell you how often I try and cross Edgewater from the green space side to I guess the west side of the street, and people are just barreling down that road, and my staff have almost been hit. I've been almost hit by cars multiple times, and so I think that 25 is a step in the right direction. Ultimately, I'd love to see 25-mile-an-hour speed bumps, those nice, kind of elongated round speed bumps put in those areas, to really keep cars at 25, and not, because it'll go down to 25 and people will still drive 35 through there, and it's but it's 30. It's 30. So people go 35 or more sometimes, and there are those quality drivers that do, I want to recognize them, that do drive the speed limit on Edgewater. They realize that it is a family-friendly neighborhood, that there is a middle school nearby, that we have a lot of people working in those businesses. And so want to applaud those drivers.
I think the
But yeah,
reduced
that was
speed is
exciting.
great.
That was a really exciting news, Tori, when we found that out recently at the West Salem Neighborhood Association meeting last month. So it does pay to speak up, you know, individuals can affect change within their local community on a city level. So I've been advocating for that speed change for 5 years.
When does that take effect?
Tori, do you have the date on that?
I'll have to check with transportation as far as sign change out. You're right, it is complicated, especially where, I hate saying complicated because it almost sounds like it's a barrier, and I don't, you know, it's a great conversation to have, like, what can we do? But it just takes time and patience and persistence. This is ODOT controlled with Edgewater, so it did take some justification to bring it down. So I understand it just got approved. It might take some time to actually prepare the signs and actually get them swapped out. And so I'll check with, I'll let you know next month. I'll find out from our transportation
Probably
engineer.
in 24 at least.
It should be sooner. I think that they're, now that it's
there's
approved,
only like 2-3 months left. This year's almost over.
Yeah, I'll check. It might be that now that it's approved, they'll try to get it up as quick as possible. It's just a matter of the signs are already there. They just have to switch out the metal. So I don't think it'll take very long, but I don't want to say next week you'll see it. But I think it should be done before 24. I think. I'll check.
Well, that's exciting. I will say on a personal level, I like to go down there sometimes, like, because I really like Momiji's. It's kind of scary going down there. And I'm in an expedition, but there are times where I'm like thinking, is there somebody going to walk out on the street? And it's not just regular everyday pedestrians like yourself, Jason, or business owners, but I'm also worried about sometimes when homeless just decide to walk across and the cars in front of me or behind me are, you know, riding me because they want to go faster. And I'm like, I'm just nervous that this street is narrow, it's small. I feel like there's so much going on around you and people are going, like you said, 35 or 40, 45 sometimes.
Sure.
So it's nerve-wracking for me. So yeah, that's exciting.
Well, and you know, you have a car that sits higher up. So being able to see oncoming traffic as you're turning onto Edgewater from Girth, or because it would be Girth there, right where Momiji's is. So, but because you're able to park so close on either side of that intersection, it for cars that sit lower, it just completely cuts off your visibility, and so your nose is really out there. You know, one of the things that the city of Seattle does before its stop signs in areas where it's I think 30 miles or lower is you can't park within 30 feet of a stop sign. And that's something that, you know, I don't know that's something that is really meant for this particular group. But, you know, and I know it takes away parking, but I also know that not all of the parking is utilized on Edgewater at this point. We're really just, you'd be talking about taking away maybe, you know, a total of 10 spots to facilitate that so that you could get better visibility for safety. I've seen multiple accidents just on McNary and Edgewater of people trying to pull out and just getting hit or sideswiped, you know, and then you have pedestrians right there involved too. And so that's you know, I mean, it's very scary. Kind of, I agree with you 100%, you know. So however we can increase that, Corey, I don't even know if that's a recommendation that we can push forward from this, you know, or have further discussion. And, you know, and how do we even present recommendations? Do we do that through you? Do we write a letter kind of like, you know, the neighborhood association say like, you know, one of those kind of, you know, whereas this particular neighborhood association feels this way, whereas, and you know, I mean, how do we go about how do we make those official recommendations from this board?
Right.
To
So
city-
you guys can make a motion anytime. So when we put an agenda together and it says no action items, that's just based on like previous meetings, previous conversations. So at any point, you have a quorum, you're acting in official capacity. Someone could present a motion. If it gets seconded, discussion, pass it. So that's the only thing is referencing like the bullets that I mentioned. Just stay within your bounds. But yeah, you could put something together on really any topic. Like if you wanted to see something along Edgewater to be considered for safety or something that would help, you could put a letter that goes to the agency as a recommendation that they look at something at any point.
Okay, great. That's good information to have. And I think that, me personally, I think prioritizing safety and within our bounds of urban renewal is important for the community.
I can bring people in too for education, because there might be something tied to, if you wanted to see, for example, 30 feet from intersections for parking, I can bring in engineers that could speak to how that could or couldn't work. So if you want to have a conversation around it, like right now we're talking about, really want to see address some safety things, I can bring in experts on that topic, get additional background, even in that context. When they come and they say, it would be difficult, or we would suggest you don't consider that, you guys are still an advisory group that can still take that up as a cause. So
I think that's a good idea.
Corey, could you just give us a quick, where are we at with we have 2 points on from your presentation last month that research is being conducted.
oh yeah.
When would we expect the research to be complete on connecting Union Street Railroad Bridge? And you may have talked about where we're at with that at the last meeting. It was a lot of information. So
sure. Yeah.
But how do we continue to help move, before we start adding additional items, how do we continue to advocate for the current items that are listed as research, especially also with the sign and art options? I'd like to know when we get to a point of like, when can city staff provide us with an actual map of options so we can actually start discussing, those? Or does it need to be the other way around? Do we need to bring forward more potential options for discussion? I guess I wanted to maybe have some clear pathways to.
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen here again, so I'll bring up a map so everyone can see. Okay. So as far as the path, I love how quickly they update this too. So you can see the ODOT improvements. This is Wallace, Edgewater, 22 to the south. Just for reference too, this is the big island that Samantha would love to see with the sign in there that ODOT says no to. And I guess they have new signs in there as far as directional signs are concerned. So we'll see when they get taken down as far as like cars barreling through there. This is a dedicated right that goes into, as you come over the bridge into onto Wallace. So if you follow Edgewater Parkway through, it's a really nice resource. You can avoid this whole intersection because, people coming into, depending on time of the day, but for the most part, if you're exiting into West Salem, people want to make that light. They just want to come through the right turn and they're not looking for people. So the nice thing about this configuration is you cross on the south side. I just referenced this on the south side, the river side of that intersection. So you just follow it along, and as you get to this section here, can you see that? There's like a fork. Mm-hmm. The off-ramp into West Salem, there's an underpass already. So you can get into Musgrave, go to the park, or you could go to Wallace if you're a biker or pedestrian that direction. If you wanted to get to the Union Street Railroad Bridge, you have to go all the way to the park, all the way around to get to it. So what we're looking at is we've engaged these two private property owners to see what it would take to have that connect all the way through. ODOT is willing to throw some money at making this feel safer. As you get into this area, you're pretty committed to either following it over into Salem over the bridge or coming in here. And without the traffic in here, there's a lot of unhoused people using it as shelter dwelling just due to lack of activity. So they could do some things to really enhance this area, make it feel safer. And especially if you had a purpose. Like right now, no one's going to Musgrave. I mean, I think I walked it. I saw people going over to Salem. I never saw anybody go left or right to go on a Musgrave into Wallace Marine Park. So I think that, you know, if you had a direct shot to the Union Street Railroad Bridge and it would, you know, you had light and you felt safer, hopefully you'd see increased activity there. So that's just one of the things that we're doing research on. So as far as timing, I've engaged both property owners. I think really what it'll come down to is when I looked at this, splitting the difference between the properties, you know, how much working with Public Works to see how much space. I think ideally, I think the standard multi-use path, if you wanted to have both bikes and pedestrians going on that, it's typically 12 feet. I don't know if you could get 12 feet and then also a buffer. So you're looking at maybe 15, 20 feet going through there. So it gets pretty tight to this building on the corner. There's quite a drop off too. I would say, well, when you look at it split between the two properties, I don't know, it's almost 8-foot drop. It's a pretty abrupt drop. So, you know, if you, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Tori. Yeah, the drop is there in that green space right off of the edge of the parked vehicles that are there to the right. Yeah, right.
Yeah, if you could, ideally we'd keep it on the high side, but that means more on this side, and they've been a little more resistant to the idea than this property. So, you know, it'd be great to have it, because if you look at it from Musgrave to the Union Street Railroad Bridge path, it starts to go up a little bit over here, but it seems relatively flat. But if you start to look at the cross slope, you know, especially when you go to the west, it really drops off this side. And so then you're talking retaining wall. It really starts to get even closer and closer to that building. So there are just some of those elements, you know, as far as how much property and what on the cost side, how much it would cost to build it. I don't really think it'd be too expensive. It's more developing a proposal. You know, right now, I think these, like I said, this property has been open to the idea. This one's resistant. But if we came through to say, you know, like to have an access easement on the property where we're going to pay X amount, then the conversation starts to get a little bit more real. You know, right now it's just kind of conceptual, high level. But once you start to get a little bit more concrete, you have a proposal and you have a price, then people really start to engage. I'd like to see, I think there's opportunities with the Second Street type project. We had a business district action plan that focused what needed to be done in certain parts of the community. We had feasibility studies, engineering studies, now we're to construction. So you're starting to see the ripple effect of redevelopment tied to this major public improvement. And hopefully, I think you guys mentioned too, wanting to see like street level Edgewater style, more lighting, more pedestrian feel. And so hopefully you'll start to see that a little bit more of that direction. So I think there's the opportunity for some of these other things like art. This is a great conversation, because I think what we can do is we can bring in like transportation engineers to talk about intersections and safety. We can bring in people from the art community and from like downtown, where they do a lot of they prepare spaces for art. So I think the first step in the art side would be there's also these art pieces that are going in downtown that are utility wraps, where you have utility boxes. That could be a quick thing, you know, where you make utility boxes look a little bit more, you know, cohesive and artistic rather than just having them there. So what does that entail in West Salem? Where can we identify art locations? This type of connection to the Union Street Railroad Bridge, I want to say it could be pretty quick, but it all depends on, you know, how the cooperation between property owners, how much space we need, what the cost is. So, I mean, ideally it'd be nice to be like this time next year, we're gearing up to, either build something next year or the year after. So that's kind of my optimistic sense of where it could be potentially with that connection. But the art could be, art, safety conversation around intersections. Those things could probably go sooner. But I think it helps to have what you guys want to see as a reference to the agency to consider. I think it's a great conversation.
Tori, as far as welcome signage to West Salem and Sam, it wouldn't be very pretty per se, but those reader boards for safety and traffic, like they'll say like accident ahead, slow down, curve. I mean, was there ever any discussion with ODOT on potentially as you're entering in West Salem, they're having some type of ODOT reader board that could also say welcome to West Salem, but also X amount of time to, Dundee and McMinnville, or, crash ahead on Wallace, potentially consider alternative route, something of that nature, so that they've got, I don't know if that's something that they've ever thought about or considered.
No conversation around a reader board, but I think there are other ways. So like 2nd Street, Edgewater, where we have these light poles, you could do banners, you could do happy to be creative and look at ways, because I'm sure there are other communities that have done things where it's not like a fixed monument sign or a temporary sign, where it's kind of like a permanent thing. If we had walls that public art, you could do something with a mural potentially that highlighted the West Salem district. That's a little bit different than your standard take on a welcome to the city of Salem type standard sign. So there are other ways around it.
That's interesting. So if you built the poles, kind of like, when you're coming in off of Liberty, or when you're coming into downtown from south. So what is that? Right onto Liberty by the main fire station, right there. They'll oftentimes have banners, huge banners for the marathons, or are you kind of referencing the potential possibility that that's a workaround to
eventually? So it's just something, I think we've thrown out ideas of gateways and stuff like that, and it seems like it has its own issues that we can work around. Now it's just a matter of finding location, and the problem with pushing it, I agree, it would be great to have it right there at Wallace. And I even mentioned when I had meetings with ODOT, we'll just build this thing up, make it like but it gets to a point where it's like so much protection and so much barrier and rocks and everything. It's almost like that's the problem too, is it's public. So it's a matter of perspective. So to me, who's fought for, and I've heard you guys have a priority to get something there, I will have felt successful to finally landed it. But someone else from the community, they're like, that's the most hideous thing I've ever seen because it's got too many rocks, or it looks like a I don't know, just a this obstacle, this big monolith sitting there in the middle of the Wallace Road. So that one particular location is never going to work out. So then you start to look at, okay, well, it's supposed to be a gateway, so it'd be nice maybe off Rosemont or something off 22. So it's still within, visibility. It's still within ODOT property. So then it's just that balance of how do you do what you're trying to achieve by having a gateway feature saying, oh, I'm in a new district. I feel like I'm in this cool downtown district of West Salem in a monument sense. If you get outside of that, maybe there's other ways, murals, banners, consistency, and like the ornamental lights, because West Salem Business Association and Salem Electric do a great job putting banners up. Maybe there's something you can do along all these, now that we'll have 2 streets full of ornamental style lighting. You can have consistent banners that let you know certain times of the year that you're in a certain, like you're in a specific part of West Salem that's different than anywhere else. Lighting, so you could do like, I mean, Second Street will be narrow enough and it's a city street. We've talked about barricading it off for events, so you'll be able to do things like that because it's not Edgewater. Edgewater is purposeful. Edgewater and Patterson, those will never be streets that you can, you know, shut off for anything. But Second Street, you can treat a little differently. It's narrow enough. You could probably run something over the street. You don't have to deal with any of the permissions that you'd have to deal with on the ODOT side. You'll still have pushback, you know, transportation engineering, and not that we're trying to suggest something unsafe, but they just like things a certain way. So it's, you know, but it's just one of those things that you can do to let people know that you're in a specific area without, you know, going about it kind of the traditional sense, I guess.
Great, well, that's a lot of information. Sometimes I feel like you have to, with the signage stuff, you have to continue to present a space like, what can we do here? And you got to get a lot of no's before you figure out where the opportunity of the yes might be. Is that kind of, I mean, that's kind of always how I feel with more decorative landmark signage. Well,
and everyone has a perspective, but what was cool too, so let's say Neighborhood Association, they had one of the intersections, I forget what one, they had an exercise to paint one of the intersections off Second, and I forget what the other intersection is. I don't know if anyone saw it over the summer. It's pretty neat. I think they did it early summer, and it's been there pretty much the whole summer. It might still be there. I don't remember. I haven't been out there recently.
It's a permanent art fixture.
Oh, it's permanent. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, where they actually painted the intersection of a residential area. I think it's like 3rd and Kingwood or something in that area.
It's near the West Salem Park. Yeah, it's really neat. But it's just one of those things where it takes a little time, takes some effort, but you can really start to see these you know, you identifying features that just reinforce the idea that you're downtown West Salem.
Is there anything that's been discussed here? I don't want to keep anybody too much longer in this meeting. We've kind of all put out our ideas. Tori's given us some really great information. Is there anything that anybody here would like to prioritize? Specifically out of any items here that were discussed?
I'm kind of curious for the current projects, how the researching is listed for some of those. Does that mean that somebody's already kind of making headway on those, or those are already being handled? So those are in the works?
So for the researching the Union Street Railroad Bridge at Water Parkway, that research, or, oh yeah, the two on here. So you've got
two,
that
and
one,
then yeah, researching sign and art options is probably the signing, but
yeah, the sign. Yeah,
I mean, those have already been presented at some point, right? And that's why
that's where we are now. So that's I would say I've engaged the downtown group to find out more about their wraps. So I think what I can do, maybe next meeting, if you want, I can bring in one of my coworkers for downtown to talk about the process to, you know, I locate public art, these utility wraps, what they look like, just give more information so that we can start to move down that road if you want to, identify locations for those things if it's something this group wants to recommend.
Well, I think that signage and art was already recommended, and so I think it would be good for the advisory board to continue to follow through with, you know, seeing some kind of completion or plan. So okay, so we kind of have maybe Tori, we could kind of add next steps for that piece of the agenda. You talked about bringing in some speakers and identifying some art spots, so that or places where we can potentially bring in art, which could also double as signage, or you know, maybe not a huge gateway sign right there on that little island, but maybe some it could have a dual purpose there.
Can I ask you, what was the issues with the spots that you were talking about that you said with ODOT?
Yeah. So in that particular spot, here, I'll just share again. So it's just easier to reference so everyone is on the same page. Share. Okay, so ideally it would be at this location here, but that's a absolute no to ODOT. So then we started talking about the other. So I'm going west on Edgewater. You know, as you come in from like Rosemont off 22. So over here is another one where we talked about, because there's so much space over here, but it's all ODOT, it's all within vision clearance. You have a grade change, and it's hard because, you know, so we have already directional signage and things like that, but we had to keep it on the city side. So you kind of work within a limited envelope, because as soon as you start getting it back here, then it's ODOT sees it as a safety issue, because you have cars exiting and entering, and then it's a distraction, because you have all this space potentially right here where you could have either a sign on one side or both sides. Then you get in that whole conversation of what does that sign look like if it were to be, you know, successful in like a identifying an envelope where you could put it into. So it wasn't a hard no like it was at that intersection of Wallace and 22. This one depends on what it is. So, you know, if we came up with a creative idea that's not as distracting or impeding a visual clearance that ODOT would approve of, then it might be something we could work around. So then it's just a matter of, what does it look like? Does the community have buy-in, and is ODOT okay with it being safe enough? The other location was as you come in, and it always is a hard sense of because you technically enter West Salem way further west than the urban renewal district. But you know, there's areas through here where you could potentially have something saying, but it's one of those where you're entering, but it doesn't feel like you're entering. So it's just a matter of, you know, what do you want it to, my understanding is it's always been trying to reinforce the Edgewater downtown feel, like that you're in the, I've heard reference of a historic district, even though you don't have a historic district, but it's like historic West Salem. Making sure that you're feeling like you're doing that rather than going to Safeway, or you're out so far outside of West Salem that you're not really there. Sorry. Yep.
I'm not suggesting that it's the right answer, but would it be a possibility to, you know, approach, you know, private property, like the corner of that Safeway parking lot, use like that kind of an area? Like,
So
yeah,
like
right there. Yeah, like I said, I don't know that that's the, you know, would be a good option, but is that an option?
Yeah, I can look into it. It's a lot of parking, and anyway, we don't have to get into and split hairs on it. But there are other things that are a little bit easier. It's like Second Street. We have bulb outs where there's spaces where you could have art. There's other things that we could have as far as features. It's not as indicative of like a gateway as like if you're exiting, actually physically coming into West Salem. It's not going to have that same sense, but you can, if you do it, if you repeat it often enough, then you really got, you create a feel in a different way versus having it right as you see it coming into the space.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Mark, you brought up a good point of private property and developing signage there, because there's also the corner of where Verizon is coming off the Marion Street Bridge. Because I mean, you look right through, you know, beyond the island and kind of right over there. And so what are the signage requirements on that corner? Would that property owner be open to that? And then how does ODOT, you know, because I'm sure there's just standard sign code, right, for that corner. or that zone. However, it's zoned, there's particular.
I'd have to get into it because usually signage and zoning, it's particular to, I mean, it applies to everyone, but like that type of code that I'm familiar with is more geared at business. I'd have to see what's required or not as far as like a public facility, a public display. So I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, that would be interesting, and maybe a good alternative to property that's not owned by ODOT.
Well, I have to
Great.
say that's all interesting too, because what is it, that Lighthouse Financial that's there right in that corner?
Yeah. Their sign that's right
the
there.
billboard the digital billboard is very distracting. And I find myself sometimes looking at it because I want to see what the picture is, because they do comical things as well. And then here I am like, oh, I'm turning or it's raining and there's a car in front of me. So I find it interesting that other things could be distracting, but then that's a very large digital sign that's allowed. And
Huge. It is bright. Right. If there's no other topics on discussion here, I think, is everybody good? Got everything you wanted to say in there? Fantastic. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. I think we've got some great discussion points. Tori and I will probably meet. Feel free to email me individually. Remember, we can't do group emails because then that more than two members, because then that becomes a public meeting, and we have to announce those kind of things. But individual emails back and forth to have a conversation about maybe what we want to further prioritize. Like an email to me and copying Tori is totally legal and appropriate, so that we could have conversation outside of the actual public meeting to kind of move and determine where we want to continue to go from here. So, all right. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. Tori, let me know that we don't need a motion to end the meeting. So have a good rest of your week.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.